Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hermitcraft. It's been a while, hasn't it? And I figured I'd look it up. It's actually been over a month since I last published an episode of Hermitcraft. And back then, the Empire's peeps were still on the server. Some of you may not know how this concluded, so the rift, it had started to shrink, and eventually shrank down to a 1x1 portal. So before it sealed itself, the Empire's crew, they made their way back to their server. And so you might be wondering where I've been during all of that time. I, my friends, have been on a break that was partially enforced and partially chosen. I needed time to reflect on my mental health, and that's something that I'm probably going to make a video entirely about. So let's get into what's been happening on Hermitcraft, because I have actually been playing quite a lot over the last month. So for the beginning here, I get to show you what I've been up to. So when we created this room, we put this little staircase in the corner, and now it's going to link us to another part of our base. As you can see here, we've got a tunnel. It's a little more interesting than usual though, because we've got minecart tracks, and you can see over there there's some water, and there's a gap on that side. So I took inspiration from our nether portal tunnel that looks quite similar to this, and I built a redstone contraption for managing minecarts. When I sit inside of this thing, it will automatically send us on our way, and then we're going to fall from high up in the world down to rather low. Aha, and we have landed, and then we have been ejected. As you can see, we've got the same contraption down here, except it works waterlogged. We are currently underwater. This was one of the reasons I'd recently got my hands on some conduits, because we've got conduit power here. And we can actually use it the same way again to get all the way back up. So this time though, we use some soul sand to send us up. And here is a brief redstone explanation. As the minecart goes in, there's a cactus to break it, a hopper to pick it up, some redstone around the back to automatically place that down, and then when we sit inside of it, we activate the string in front of the observer, so that's going to create another signal to power the rail that it's sitting on. So when I hop in, off we go. And the way in which this works when we're waterlogged is simply that we have these trapdoors in front of everything to hold back the water. So that'll stop any water from flowing in and breaking the string. So as I mentioned, this actually starts really high up in the world. If we just move through these blocks, you can see where the tunnel is. And it drops us so far down, you can't even see it until you get past a bunch of these caves. So part of the drop actually lets you see the nether farm over here for a brief moment, and then it goes even lower down to the deep slate level. And you might have noticed if we are to just swim down here, it takes us to our amethyst geode, where there are some frog lamps in the middle now. This is because I had glow squid spawning inside of this farm, which is not something that I wanted. So you may recall that we have a slime farm, and it's actually part of a ginormous perimeter. You can see the boundaries of that perimeter over here, and over the season I've lit up all the caves and removed all of the water so that we could have a glow squid farm inside of this area. That is why I needed to add the frog lamps to the geode to stop the glow squid spawning there. And in learning about how they spawn, they need complete darkness. So by adding glow lichen down the sides of this waterlogged tunnel here, we stop glow squids from spawning and inside of the geode. And there really was no reason to waterlog this tunnel other than to have a little bit of fun and do things different. And if you're wondering where it leads to that AFK spot for the slime farm. So this is where I stand to enact the perimeter, and down there is where the slimes will spawn. And we are all prepped to build a glow squid farm. However, it's going to have to wait for another day. Because we, my friends, have to undertake a big project for another hermit who I said I would help out with their card game. Some of you know that Vintage Beef is making a trading card game here on Hermitcraft, and we're going to play a helping hand in creating the arena for that game. But that's all to come. I've got more things that I've been up to that I want to show you, and I also just want to show you this in action. At this point though, like, this is all you get to see, just a bunch of particle effects whizzing right at you. It actually takes very little time to get all the way to the top, so let's continue this ride. And I gotta think of something to say, bam, and then we're here. Look at that, very slick. You know what it's gonna do next though, right? It's gonna kick us off, and then it's gonna be ready to use again. So that was a loose end to tie off, and I've tied up most of the other ones around the base here too. I'm not sure what I've shown in a video, but we got this connection right here into the spine of the rib cage, and you can head all the way to the bottom. And down here I finished the path that leads to David Copperfield, our copper aging facility, which has been absolutely pumping out tons of fully oxidized copper, as you can see. But that's not all that it creates, because I've added an additional farm, one that complements this very much. It is a honey farm of all things. And that is because the honeycomb here can be used to stop the copper from aging. So we've got a simple little farm here. It is just 4 bees nests, and the reason it's that small is because it kind of matches the amount of copper that's made up top. And I've been using this thing a ton. There you go, like a full box there. Obviously I've got some supplies for aging, but we are absolutely earning tons of this stuff. And in a future episode, we're going to find a fun way to give it all away. But while we're here, a quick demonstration of the redstone. It's really simple stuff. You've got dispensers that simply point into those and need to be activated every so often. So there is a clock at the back here, and it's only turned on when we stand on these pressure plates. So the idea is that this is the AFK spot, and then when you stand here, that farm is now active. And of course, the entire area above is loaded too, so that all the copper can do its aging. Oh yes, and over here we have a grand old entrance to this area too. You can see we're using the similar design you've already seen just again at the entrance here. And seems that I missed a block right here. And well, it's not actually part of the build palette, but why not break the rules? There's one of those there. So I have some plans for big and exciting projects for the next few episodes, and when those are concluded, we may just start to work on this area up here. I've got some ideas for this spot, but part of the idea would be to connect our base over to this area. And if you need a reminder, we've got our ugly ice farm over here that we need to change up so it better complements the gorgeous game that B-Dubs has created here. This is the horse course from last season, rebuilt for this one. And then off in the distance, you got the games area. But as I mentioned, we're going to be working on Vintage Beef's trading card game Arena in this episode, but I still have more things to show you. So, remember the minecart rails that I showed you? Well, it was kind of based on this tunnel right here, just to jog your memory. And nether tunnels is kind of the theme for what I got to show you next. There is a spot that I've been visiting all season for sand and for the collection of terracotta. The mining mesa and the mining desert, as signposted here. Very simple tunnel design, but really got a nice atmosphere, very effective. And of course the portal there just leads you to where the sign tells you it goes. This one on this side happened to be a little bit longer though. And then a little further down the tunnel there's also the witch farm, which had a very small and short tunnel here. Which farm is it? It's my witch farm, not that the sign tells you whose it is. But anyways, it was really nice to take care of this as you travel a lot through the Nether over a season, and it's always nice to just travel through areas that are actually finished. So there was another one that I wanted to take care of. So in the opposite direction through the Nether Hub, we have the main tunnel here actually unfinished, and then just over here to the right, I've been constructing a new tunnel that takes you to the farming area that me and Keralis have been working on over the season. If you're not quite sure where I mean, you'll find out exactly where in just a moment, but let's just walk through here. It's kind of hypnotic, right? These alternating wood textures really complement each other. So eventually it kind of flattens out, and then after here I've actually not finished this project yet because I need to hook it up to this area. Now you're probably remembering the allays and the adventures that me and Keralis had. So our farming area is in the overworld. You can get there through that portal, and then we've got this crazy storage system here. One of the things I'm going to chip away at on my live streams is just decorating this thing. And I also need to figure out how to connect this thing, as the nether portal's up here and the tunnel's down there, and it's all a little bit confusing. We're going to have an entrance to this area in the corner. So at some point in the future, I'll show you when that's done. And if you want to catch me working on the project, well, I do it over on Twitch when I do my live streams. So be sure to be following me on Twitch, and hopefully I'll see you over there. So that fills in all the gaps and brings you up to speed. You now know what I've been up to over the past month. I haven't given up on Hermitcraft. I have indeed been playing plenty. And now we are all ready to work on Beef's trading card game Arena. So I actually got to play a game of this against Tango. Beef put together a test game. He gave us both a deck of cards and we duked it out, and it was an immense amount of fun. The whole thing is actually over on my second channel though. And so if you want to follow me on Twitch or subscribe to my second channel or anything else that I do, linktree.xisuma.co. That website has recently been overhauled, so please do go check it out again. There's loads of interesting stuff to discover. But let's continue and talk about what we're going to do with this arena. So what Beef has created here will mostly remain, with a few adjustments and a big overhaul to the redstone, we've got a system that's going to automate most of the game and just make it utterly fantastic to play. And then when that's in place, around the outside here, we're going to construct a stadium of sorts, which is really going to elevate everything to the next level. And we start by trying to pick out a location for this arena. And that, my friends, I've been able to do. You may be able to get your bearings by paying attention to what's in the background here. Yep, that's right, this is the starter area, and where it ends, there's kind of a large amount of space over here. You may notice, though, that I've actually cleared out all sorts of trees and things that were there before. And so over here I've got a bunch of like random stuff that I chopped down. I mean, there were a lot of spruce trees and a lot of other things too, but it's all been taken care of. And I've been gathering up the supplies for this building. As you'll see in here, a whole variety of different materials that we need. Now, in order to find this location, I wanted to pick a spot that would, fill in spaces between one thing and another and kind of add to what's already here. Now, you see these blue concrete blocks? That is the border of Scarland, which has started to extend over this ocean with some just absolutely stunning terraforming. So the two of us are able to meet up and have a chat about this area, and considering that the border is over there and there's plenty of space beyond it, at some point in the future Scarland will extend to over here, and then we'll have some fun working together to link the two areas together. And I say that because the arena is going to be built somewhere around where I'm standing right now. And that's actually a fair distance from where these blocks are. But not only are we going to build an arena, there'll be an aesthetic that surrounds it with gardens and points of interest to really make this build something special. So the build is partially finished at the moment. We are missing some materials that I have a plan for in the future. A way that we can get our hands on some sculpt blocks that are going to fill in some blank spaces here. So if we use like Madoka to show you how the rest of the build would have looked, you can see we've got two towers with the TCG lettering in, and behind them, that's where a bunch of sculpt blocks go. And down the bottom here too, behind the end rods, we need sculpt blocks, which I just do not have, and no one's made a sculpt block shop. Now you can see what I've done is I've taken the aesthetic of the arena and just extended that kind of clean, straightforward look to this seating area around the outside. And so with this thing being, very partially finished thanks to a lack of sculpt blocks, we are going to move on to the redstone, and like I said, I've got an interesting sculpt farm idea for a future episode. Now the redstone that will make Beef's card game work, as you can see behind me, is a marvel of engineering, one that I did not undertake myself. So when I told Beef that I wanted to help him put together this arena and do the redstone for him, I committed to a certain time frame, and unfortunately it overlapped with something that was rather stressful that I had to deal with. So at the end of the day, I would come into my redstone test world, I'd sit down and try and do some basic redstone, and my brain was just not there. I literally couldn't do the most basics of stuff, yet alone an advanced arena like this. So I reached out to my buddy Cybot2419, who has designed many of the storage systems we've used in the past of Hermitcraft, and they were kind enough to step up and create an arena for us. And without them, this wouldn't have happened. I had just been so worn out and stressed out by some recent events that my mind was just not in a place to do redstone. But what I do understand is that we're bringing together different components that achieve different objectives, and what you're looking at right now is probably the most important, difficult thing to figure out. This, my friends, is our deck randomizer. It's very important that we're able to take a deck and actually take all of the cards out of it and genuinely shuffle them all, which has some interesting challenges because some of these items will stack up. Now here, for example, is the original way in which this was done. The deck would have been put here, the items would filter down into one of 3 different droppers from the hoppers. And as an immediate demonstration as to how the distribution here just isn't random, we've got these cards in this slot, that's okay, but when we look in here, all of our stackables have ended up in the same one. So when we press the button, we are going to get a card at a time. Let's just press this a few times and then talk about what's happening here. The issue is quite simple to understand because these cards have a 1 in 3 chance, yet if they were equally shuffled, the chance of getting a piston would be far greater than getting a redstone card. Now you might be thinking there's plenty of ways to easily randomize these items, but I assure you it gets pretty tricky when you get into the weeds of it. A common suggestion I saw in my chat when I was trying to figure this out was to simply break a container that has all of the cards in. So let's just remember the order of those ones right there, because when we pick them back up, they're going to go into our inventory in the same order they came out of the chest. What you do have to do though is just imagine that the hotbar was above the other items, and then you can see the order is the same. Now, one of the best ideas we came up with was having a whole bunch of droppers, 42 in total, all of which could hold one card at a time. So a minecart hopper could come along and you could distribute one card into each and every dropper. But then you would need some complex redstone that could randomly and evenly pick one of those droppers at once, and then once it's been selected and a card's been withdrawn, you would need less and less hoppers to be selected each and every time. And this is where Cybot came up with the winning solution. There is actually something in this game that is purely random, and that is which minecart hopper will have its items taken out by the hopper down below. So there's actually 42 of them stacked right here on top of an activator rail, which is locked because of the redstone over on this side. So currently this thing is empty. Let's go ahead and fill it up with cards. And now that they're all in there, it doesn't matter if some of them are stacked or not, and actually you can't fit a full deck of cards into a shulker box because there's 42 in a deck, so it's a good thing that some of these are stacking up. So when I press this button, the redstone's going to turn off for just a blink, but that's enough time for every single card to be moved from the shulker box into the minecart hoppers down below. This one that we can click on just happens to have a card in, but if we open up the chest, you can see that they are slowly making their way out at random into this chest. Now we can also adapt this system so that we can pull out one item at a time. When there's an item inside of the dropper, it's actually going to lock the hopper. So now all of the cards are just sitting inside of these minecart hoppers, and we will get one at random on request. So if I press the button here, we get that card, and another one is in waiting. The crucial point here though is that all of the cards are treated equally. The fact that some of them can stack becomes irrelevant, and we do actually get a randomized draw from across 32. So no surprise here to see that we've got this card again, considering that there's quite a few of those in that deck. So hopefully I've drilled that point home. This is actually a really tricky thing to do, but we've got a perfect solution, and now we can move on to the other systems that make the game work. Now this might look like a tangled mess, but it's going to help to think about this from the perspective of the games master. Because before a game starts, there is a coin toss. There are two different types of fireworks in the middle here, one for either side, and so that tells you which player is going to start the game. So these are the games master's buttons for controlling the game, which activates the redstone circuits below. The lime circuit will determine which player leads, and alternatively, the green circuit can randomize that. So here you'll see a simple randomizer where a different signal strength can be generated, and that then sends a signal off to either side of the lime circuits. We're actually going to simulate a game a little bit here so you can see it in action. I've got two different decks. We're going to put them into either side. These of course go into the white shulker boxes, and let's use the randomizer circuit over the back here. So it's going to give one player the lead after it's initialized the deck. So we've seen the items move up into the player's hand, and it is also this player that gets to lead because we've got some lamps that are lit up along the back here. So yes, there is some redstone that keeps track of whose turn it is, and it's able to swap these lamps over. And of course, when you end a turn, you get an extra card put into your deck, so you press this button and then it swaps it for the other player to then take their turn. So from here, the game will probably go back and forth for a while as the players get their hermits set up and start to exchange damage, but at some point, one of those hermits may end up being extinguished from the game. And this is when a prize card needs to be delivered to that player at the end of their turn. So if I go ahead and activate this one, it'll put an additional card into the deck over here as a prize. And what's really important to understand is that that card actually comes from the opposite deck. So when a card is drawn, it's taken out of this minecart hopper, put into this double chest, and if we go below it and look up, you'll see there's a hopper pointing into these droppers and one that goes to the right. So these ones, as you can see, will shimmy the card all the way over to the opposite side, and then it gets sent up into the player's hand. Similar to this, if there's another reason just to give a player an extra card, which might be one of the specifications of using a particular card, there is this light blue circuit which essentially does the same thing without shimmying the card all the way over to the other side. And from there, the game is pretty simple. It just goes back and forth, all of the redstone will do its thing, and eventually the game will end and there is a reset circuit for that. So the original cards that we got on this side didn't actually include a hermit in the deck, and if that happens, there is an option to re-roll too. It requires the player though to come over here and put their cards back into their deck, and then there's an option for the games master to simply re-roll their hand. So those items will be picked up again by the hopper minecarts down below, so they're a part of the shuffle, and then 7 cards are distributed back into here. Let's now go ahead and actually end the game, and you'll see here that these lights are activating because all of the cards in the deck are being shuffled back into the hand, so when the player walks away from the game, they've got all of their cards and it's ready to go again. Now obviously I've given you a bit of a bird's eye view without an explanation as to how each and every part works. But the point would be that this is how complex redstone is done. You need to break it down into simpler components and handle them one at a time. And so with these color-coded circuits, you can probably see how things are sort of broken down into different sections and they interact with one another. And on that note, I've shown you everything. The only thing we didn't use was the discard pile, which is what these shulker boxes are for, but they don't actually interact with any redstone. Once again, a big thank you to Cybot2419 for coming in and saving the day here really, as I would have not been able to put this all together with the stress that I've been under. But now, we can get onto the Hermitcraft server and make this thing a reality. And here is what that looks like. A giant hole in the ground, a whole bunch of concrete and redstone wires running everywhere. And I am far from finished, but this feels like the right place to wrap things up. You've seen the redstone, you understand how it works, and now I've just got a grind in front of me where I've got to build the rest of it and then playtest this little arena. So when you're watching the next episode, all of that will be done, and we'll be undertaking a very interesting project to get the sculk that needs to go in these gaps behind me. It's a great reason to be subscribed if you're not so already. And if you enjoyed today's episode of Hermitcraft, be sure to leave a like. Thanks as always for supporting this channel, and I'll be seeing you very soon with another episode of Hermitcraft. Bye bye.